Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week. For this one, talking about the Intel Ponte Vecchio GPUs, Sapphire Rapids CPUs, which Intel is now officially confirming some of that information. It's not rumors anymore. There are some rumors though, RDNA2 rumored to be at CES, and then also just some industry news like the Intel supply side update. Intel's had supply shortages for a long time now. Update on that, AMD elaborating on the best and preferred CPU cores, and some of the confusion that was spawned in the industry between Windows Task Manager and Ryzen Master. So that's most of what we're covering for this week, with some Linux news as well. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Drop and Hi-Fi Man HE4XX planar magnetic headphones. The HE4XX headphones focus on high-quality audio listening experiences with comfortable foam cushions for the ear cups. Comfort is also ensured with a leather-covered spring steel headband, allowing flexibility and durability against bends. These headphones are capable of delivering big sound for audiophiles while being positioned competitively in price. Learn more at the link in the description below. All right, for a news item here, Apple throws in with Intel against SoftBank. We previously reported on Intel filing suit against Fortress and SoftBank for alleged patent abuse, something which Apple has now joined. Apple and Intel both say that Fortress is behaving as a patent troll, accumulating patents for the purpose of litigation, not for innovation, and both companies are now suing SoftBank-owned Fortress for the claims. Apple stated, quote, Apple has suffered economic harm in the form of litigation costs and diversion of resources away from innovation to respond to these entities' serial nuisance suits. Apple has been sued minimally 25 times now by Fortress, with Fortress demanding up to $5 billion for damages. Other companies attached to Fortress claim that they are owed royalties for Apple products, and Apple responded by calling the requested damages, quote, a facade. This one's probably going to be in the legal system for a long time, so we'll follow up on it as it advances, but so far it's two of the biggest computer part manufacturers in the world suing Fortress, so we'll see how it goes. But in the very least, we know that Intel has a lot of experience dealing with this type of stuff. So, next news item. Intel's gotten pretty serious with its GPU team. We've discussed all this stuff in the past, but Intel picked up Raja Koduri previously. He was at AMD before that on the Radeon Technologies group. It picked up Tom Peterson, notably from NVIDIA, and a couple of the marketing people from AMD as well, which we'll see how that works out. But it's got some good talent in the mix, especially on the engineering side. And last week we discussed rumors on Intel unveiling its first GPU, which is supposed to be a non-gaming GPU at first. It'll be more of an enterprise deployment or an exascale deployment. So the GPU is rumored to be 7nm class solution. It'll be codenamed apparently Ponte Vecchio, and it was also suggested that this GPU would debut alongside the Intel Sapphire Rapids CPU family. That's supposed to be coming up as well. Lo and behold, Intel announced on November 17th that these are actually some of the names, and that those rumors were accurate, basically, during its HPC developer conference that it held. Ponte Vecchio will represent Intel's first foray into the DGPU market, as well as marking Intel's first Xe graphics architecture product, and it will also be more of an accelerator for HPC and AI workloads. It'll be aimed at the emerging exascale computing segment. Ponte Vecchio will debut in the new Aurora supercomputer. You can see Project Aurora from last week we covered in the previous hardware news episode. And that's supposed to be installed at the, I don't know how to pronounce half these names. We had to pause for a second so I could look up more pronunciation guides. Thanks, Intel. So this one, the video I found, of course, was a 1 minute, 10-second video on how to say one word. That's necessary. The Argonne National Laboratory is where Project Aurora is supposed to go. So Ponte Vecchio is indeed built on Intel's 7nm process. Intel confirmed this officially now. And it eschews the monolithic die approach for an MCM approach instead. This is something that NVIDIA actually published a white paper on a couple of years ago now. And the idea has taken off. It worked well with Ryzen. GPUs are not CPUs, of course. They're still silicon, though. And MCM is a good way to bring down the cost of building the product, the silicon product, although it introduces some other challenges along the way, like latency and potentially other costs. Anyway, it's supposed to be a multi-chip module design, or MCM, and It uses both Intel's advanced Foveros packaging, which we discussed in December of 2018, and also EMIB interconnect fabric. Intel was scarce on the specifics regarding the number of execution units per chip, clock rates, etc., though collectively speaking, the cards can scale up to thousands of EUs. More importantly, Ponte Vecchio will herald the commercial arrival of PCIe 5.0, as the cards will use the upcoming CXL standard, which a lot of companies have thrown their weight behind recently. Intel's version of the interface will be called the Xe-Link, and it isn't presently clear how Intel will implement it just yet, but we at least have the name. The goal will be memory coherency between the various EUs and the CPUs. As a reminder, the Aurora supercomputer is being built by Cray and will use Cray's Slingshot platform. Each Slingshot node or blade will house 2 Sapphire Rapid CPUs combined with 6 Ponte Vecchio accelerators, and Aurora will support over 200 nodes, as well as apparently 230 petabytes of storage and 10 petabytes of memory. So lots of technology in that. Next up, rumor. RDNA2 at CES 2020. We'll see. This kind of stuff is, we try not to report on too many of these rumors unless they seem like they might actually have some accuracy behind them. So this one, the rumors from a chip hell user suggest that AMD could preview its second generation of RDNA, which is what shipped in Navi GPUs. It's a new architecture. AMD claimed it was keeping GCN alive in the interim, but they'll probably start to deviate away from that eventually. So the user noted he's got a fairly sound track record as it pertains to leaks, and has leaked accurate information in the past on Radeon 7, leaked accurate information on the RX 590, and all that said, heed the usual note of a grain of salt. Anyway, details on RDNA2 are not plentiful. We know it's in development, and past roadmaps have pegged a 2020 launch. We also know that RDNA2, like Zen 3, will be underpinned by an optimized 7nm plus process. However, the newest rumors via ChipHell give traction to the talking point that AMD is going to implement hardware-level ray tracing support, bringing with it a degree of parity with NVIDIA, who continue to pat themselves on the back for all the fuss about ray tracing this past year. There's also been talk of enthusiast-grade desktop graphics cards with a mix of GDDR6 and potentially HBM2 endowed options. HBM2's had a bit of a troubled history on AMD product. AMD was more or less forced to use HBM, largely for power reasons, but it's extremely expensive, so that's the downside. Additionally, AMD is also supposedly looking to push some higher-end cards with RDNA2, likely attempting to compete with the RTX 2080 Super and maybe 2080 Ti more directly. But again, we'll see about all that. That's rumors. Hard drive makers have shipped a record storage capacity for Q3 2019. Solid-state storage continues to eat the profit margins for spinning storage, but spinning storage still has a lot of global deployments, especially in data centers and places like Backblaze for backup services, or even locally. We use it because it's the most efficient and cost-effective storage for large media files that you might not be accessing every day. But SSDs have been getting more and more deployment, even in servers these days. As we continue, though, to lead more data-centric lives, perhaps surprisingly or maybe not, the hard drive makers have notched a record third quarter, shipping a combined 240 exabytes of storage. As AnandTech points out, for perspective, the combined sales of all SSDs and hard drives last year totaled 912 exabytes. This is just one quarter. So just representing hard drives, one quarter, you're at 240 exabytes versus all of last year totaling 912 for SSDs and hard drives. It also marks a 15% growth over second quarter 19, where hard drive makers shipped roughly 207 exabytes of storage. The demand is being pinned on the rising need for larger nearline drives, think 14 terabytes, 15, 16 terabytes, which are all seeing wider adoption among enterprise customers. The sales figures combine Seagate, Western Digital, and Toshiba. For those interested, the updated market share for third quarter 19 is as follows. Seagate is at 40.2%, Western Digital at 35.4%, and Toshiba at 24.4%. In a letter to its customers, Intel reiterated that it's still struggling to balance supply and demand. 14 nanometer has struggled for the last maybe 18 months or so now, where it's kind of been in and out of availability. If you saw the Pentium G line disappear when it was actually worthwhile, then the reason is largely because of the the supply limitations and that supply being shifted over to other products, like the high-end CPUs and desktop CPUs also in general shifting to SIs instead of to DIY market and retailers. So anyway, the letter, despite its brevity, offers a sobering snapshot of Intel's business in the last year or so. The chip maker has spent over a year trying to maximize 14 nanometer supply and manufacturing, while also trying to ramp its infamous 10 nanometer production. Intel has relegated lower margin products like entry-level chipsets back down to 22 nanometers to free up the limited fab space. And in the letter, Intel acknowledges the increasing use of foundries, in quotes, to help increase supply. Those foundries would be TSMC and Samsung, and to some extent, global foundries as well, which Intel has used some of these to outsource chip production before, like, again, TSMC. The letter also mentions Intel experiencing a production variability this quarter, further compounding the ongoing problem. We can likely interpret that the variability here, in big air quotes, means yield of the silicon, which has led to more recent delays in shipments. Intel doesn't really hazard a guess as to when it expects the supply constrictions to ease, but it has previously committed to resolving the issue sometime in 2020, and it better do it soon because things are looking kind of rough for Intel right now, especially in DIY enthusiasts, although that's not the biggest market. That would be server and enterprise, but they're going to face trouble there too. System 76 bringing Linux laptops to the market. In the interest of talking about something a bit different and definitely worth covering, Linux coming to just in general getting any kind of spread in consumer is always good news. System 76 is both a PC manufacturer and a Linux developer responsible for the Pop OS, and it's working on bringing Linux laptops to market. The laptop, as we know, would be preloaded with the distribution of Linux, much like the company's Telio desktop PC. And according to CEO Carl Ritchell, the company is ironing out designs and trying to nail down an aesthetic while also preparing to look into supply chain issues and hardware providers. Ritchell expects that the process could take 2 to 3 years before arriving to a final product, which was akin to what the company went through with its desktop previously. System 76 will look at developing something for the Ultrabook form factor first, but also has its gaze set upon high-end gaming or workstation variants. Last one, AMD elaborating on the best or preferred cores terminology in well, it was on Reddit mostly the last week, which is always why companies have to elaborate on things. So AMD emailed Gamers Nexus a few days ago and most of the other outlets to provide a clarification on preferred or best cores. And this wasn't a topic we knew was even needed to be addressed, but apparently there was some discussion we missed. So what AMD has told us is that apparently some users took notice of Windows Task Manager and AMD Ryzen Master reporting some potentially conflicting information, and AMD decided it was worth correcting some of the errors in the assumptions online. So AMD noted the following in its email to us, quote, "Over the past week or two, we've seen an uptick in chatter alleging that Windows is selecting the wrong fastest core. These posts typically cite Ryzen Master as evidence, though I've also seen some trawling of the Windows event log as justification." And AMD continued to note that both Ryzen Master and Windows are correct, highlighting these reasons. So first of all, the firmware maintains the rank of the cores within the CPU. The final test pass allows firmware to retain the volt frequency traits of the CPU and its cores individually. AMD says that its CPPC2 provides the, quote, preferred core as what it calls a continuous abstract unitless performance scale, with AMD saying that it arbitrarily ranks the cores as 3% different from each other for some sort of rounding or to prevent rounding errors in the scaling of frequency. AMD says that Windows, quote, selects and prioritizes the fastest core in firmware with the additional criteria that there must be a second core in the same CCX that's nearly as fast. The scheduler does thermal and electrical core rotation between these two cores to ensure one isn't shouldering all the single-threaded work at one time, end quote. And then finally, AMD pointed out what should have been hopefully obvious. Ryzen Master is built for overclocking. And for the most part, there's not a lot of reason to use it for day-to-day, non-enthusiast type of tuning. So Ryzen Master is therefore built for overclocking and should select the best, single best volt frequency curve in the processor from that perspective, as opposed to Windows and Task Manager, which is just trying to well, Windows is just trying to breathe is what Windows is doing. So there's more to it, but the short of it is that Ryzen Master is clearly a tool built with a different purpose, and AMD says that this is all expected behavior. And you can read the rest of that one in the show notes, linked in the description below, along with all of our other links for this coverage and sources. So at the time this video goes live, Black Friday will have already happened, but if we're all on the same page here, the computer hardware sales start basically at the beginning of November and don't end until probably January 1st. So there's still plenty to be had. Also, before we get into that, the set table here might change between shots because we filmed this over a few days this time. But I did keep consistency on the shirt choice, I think. So first quick note on this is responsible consumption. It's easy to get caught up in sales for this stuff. The computer hardware discounts are typically pretty genuine. They're actual discounts or new prices that are indeed lower, as opposed to a lot of other industries where you don't get much movement during the holidays. So that's exciting, but we ask that you obviously only buy what you either need or really, really want, and try not to get caught up in the hype of, oh, I'm saving money if I buy this now, because if you're not going to use it or you don't need to use it, then you're not really saving any money by spending more of it. So responsible consumption, always a good thing, and especially with e-waste, with rare earth metals that we don't have an infinite supply of. All right, so now that we've gotten that disclaimer out of the way, that goes for everything, our store included. But we do have a discount on our store through the 4th, December 4th. If you use code Black Friday at checkout, you'll get 15% off on all orders. We have a decent amount, at time of filming, we have a decent amount of mod mats left in stock, although we've been moving them pretty quickly for large sizes. And then the medium size will be in stock end of December. So if you order medium now, it's on back order. You won't get it before Christmas, but you'll get it around end of December. And if you order it with the code, it'll still apply even though it's not shipping upon order. The large ones are shipping on order presently, and then we've also got a decent amount of the shirts, the toolkits, stuff like that in stock. So code Black Friday for 15% off of store.gamersnexus.net. For other sales, there's some really cool stuff because there's the brand new Ryzen 3000 series has a couple of discounted CPUs, which is because spoiler alert, the X series CPUs were a massive waste of money basically since their inception. And by X series, I mean, well, there's the Intel ones, but separate from that, by X series, what we really mean is 3800X and 3600X. The 3700X, there's no 3700 blank. 3700X is a 3800X, except the 3800X is slightly faster. It's absolutely not worth a $100 price delta, but AMD seems to have realized that and has probably realized it has a lot of them sitting on the shelves still, because it's currently marked the 3800X down by about $70 from baseline, so it puts it about $30 over the 3700X's original pricing, which is actually not bad at that point. So at the $30 difference, we're okay with recommending the 3800X purchase because it becomes more of a paying for a probably guaranteed better bin where you can maybe, if you're interested in undervolting or overclocking to a significant degree, the 3800X would be worth it at that point. But we still don't think it would be worth the $100 original difference. So that one's listed as on sale, which is unexpected because it is kind of brand new still. We'll have links to that and all the other stuff in the description below if you're interested in any of these. The 3600X, same deal here. This is another CPU that is just like the 3800X. It's completely fine as a CPU. It's really got no major downsides. It's just that the pricing was a waste of money versus the 3600, which we strongly recommended. It was originally a $50 price gap. Now it's about $5, and these numbers are going to change, obviously, as the sales throughout the season change. So what you're hearing in this video might not be accurate at the time of when you watch it, but that's what it is now. And at a $5 price gap, we do think the 3600X is also fine to purchase. It's especially because the 3600 is like $5 or $6 discounted now as well for whatever that's worth. So that one's good to point out. It's the same thing. If you're not overclocking at all, you get like 100, 200 megahertz, about 200 megahertz base and boost increase, which for $5 we think is worth it, and not worth 50 though. The R7 2700X is probably the best deal out of all the Black Friday stuff we've seen so far. This CPU launched at around $330 or so. The 2700 was maybe, actually it might have been more than that. It might have been more like $400 for the 2700X, but I think it was $400. But either way, now it's way down there. So the 2700X is currently at about $160, which makes it a really strong alternative to the R5 3600. So if you're considering the 3600 at about $200, the 2700X for $40 less can save you some money, get you more threads and cores, but you lose some of the other benefits like memory overclocking support and IPC gains. What we would generally recommend is if you're gaming only, the $40 difference makes it kind of difficult, but if you're gaming only and they were the same price, then the 3600 is probably what we would choose. If you are doing anything that's going to be more thread bound, so Blender, stuff like that, Blender tile-based rendering, and any applications that can actually make use of the additional, that'd be 2 cores and 4 threads, then the 2700X is worthwhile. And at that price, the current discounted price, it is genuinely a very good deal. This is where you typically would find Intel i5s in ages of yore. So to have this 2700X in that price range is really good. The next one, R5 2600X, same thing here as the others. It wasn't particularly worth it for the X SKUs of the 2600, except the pricing is low now, so it's fine. It's $120 or so at the moment, which makes this an especially good price considering it's basically the same as the original R3 series, 1200, 1300X, stuff like that. So if you're building a budget machine, the 2600X is a good deal. And then at the high end, for GPUs, the 2080 Ti FTW3 Ultra currently has a $30 promo code, which is EMCUUVE32 on Newegg, and a $50 rebate card if you count those. Kind of questionable if you do, but that's $80 off if you do. We like it because it's got the thermistors, which are more of an enthusiast interest thing than functionally useful, but it's an interesting value add. It's part of the ICX setup that EVGA launched. And the Super Hybrid, the 2080 Super Hybrid is also on sale. That one is marked at $20 rebate if you count it, and $20 instant discount, which is definitely something you can count. And it's a liquid-cooled card. So you get a bit more stable frequency, lower noise at a given clock and temperature, stuff like that. 2080 Ti Kingpin has a $100 rebate form for it. This card is not for everybody. You probably shouldn't buy it. But for the people that it does suit, it is the most fun card we've worked with for overclocking this year, so we'll absolutely give it that. It's basically the top of the top for what you can get for enthusiast cards. The performance stock, it's not like the extra $500-600 you spend gives you a proportional scaling versus baseline on some other 2080 Ti. That's not what you're paying for. You're paying for a bunch of pre-modding done on the PCB and software, like the classified tools. So these things allow you to bypass NVIDIA native limitations and set voltage. You can overclock it pretty high on liquid and even increase the voltage on liquid, which it comes with a 240 CLC, or you can put it under LN2 and it's the best card that we've worked with for that. Sapphire 5700 XT Nitro has a $20 promo code, which is 7BFPC32, and then the Power Color Red Devils marked down to $420 as well at time of filming, which is another really good deal for that card because it was one of the top 2 or so that we tested alongside the Nitro Plus, and both of those are discounted right now. And then finally, motherboards, we'll just mention one. There's the X5 Sony Aorus Elite, which is certainly not the best board on the market, but it's okay, and at $170, it's actually pretty good deal. So that's 12-phase VRM, good VRM heatsink, all that stuff. And then we've got some write-ups for these in the description below if you want to click on any of the articles we posted, like best monitors and the best sales in general for the stuff I just recapped. There's a link in the description. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. As always, go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly, or patreon.com/gamersnexus. We'll see you all next time.